if you've ever struggled to modify behavior, maybe you struggle with emotional eating or kind of boredom eating or eating late at night. Maybe you struggle with consistency in the gym. Maybe you struggle with adhering to some sort of plan. Maybe things get in the way and you're not able to stick to your routines that you had previously committed to because of external or some unforeseen situation happening. Now, if any of those things have applied to your life, then this module is going to teach you how to effectively modify your behavior to de-encode, so to speak, unproductive behaviors that have been ingrained and habituated over time and replace them with productive behaviors that are going to actually lead you towards your goals. Now, although we are going to be discussing behavior modulation or behavior change within the scope and the parameters of fitness and nutrition and things like that, these fundamental principles are ubiquitous. So they can be applied to your health, your fitness, your relationships, your business or work or school or whatever else you need to, because the principles are always generally going to remain the same. What's going to change is the application of the principles depending on the different contexts. And so throughout this module, we're going to do a very, very, very deep dive. We're going to talk all about the variables that influence behavior. So why do you behave in certain ways? Why do you have impulsive behavior, if that's something you struggle with? How to manage compulsions, talking about the neurobiology, talking about environmental factors, internal factors, talking about psychological variables, and just all sorts of things. We're also going to develop a very clear skill set that you can implement at various stages to really drastically help you enhance your adherence. And so the desired behaviors become automated over time. We're going to lay out a step-by-step approach. This is going to be a very, very comprehensive course. And the first module is going to be around behavior change, although we're probably going to have to record it in several installments. So this is only going to be the first installment of even that first module, which is the behavior change module. Now, we need to kind of establish a couple of common understandings. So the first is understanding why behavior change is so important. Now, to some, this might seem like a very obvious or kind of pointless question, but it is important to understand nonetheless in terms of how this is actually playing out in people's lives. I almost guarantee you in several areas of your life, you are not altering behavior that is harmful to you. And there are reasons why, and we're going to cover that and so that you can actually alter them permanently. But it's important to really understand the severity and the gravity of this situation when we come to behavior, because no matter what, no matter how advanced or effective the nutrition or the training or whatever protocol it is that you're trying to implement, none of it will matter unless you can alter your behavior for sustained periods of time. So coming back to the initial question, why is behavior change so important? There are all sorts of different things that predispose us to dying early and having a very, very low quality of life that are preventable, yet we do not necessarily go and take the specific actions required in order to make sure that we can prevent these things. So again, it begs the question, why don't we do that? If we know that smoking causes lung cancer, why do people still smoke? If we know that excessive consumption of calories over an extended period of time is going to lead to weight gain and going to lead to being overweight or obese, why is it that we have over 75% of North Americans that are overweight or obese? That is an astronomical figure. You would think that because of the risk factors associated with being overweight and having excess adiposity, that almost no one would be fat. But again, in order to enact effective behavior change, we need to understand the context and the scope that where the individual is coming from so that we can apply an appropriate intervention strategy to get the results that we want. Because our behavior is not always logically based. Yes, we can think logically, but a lot of the times our behavior is emotionally predicated. It's based on, physiological responses sometimes to external environments or even internal changes in our environment. Another really important statistic is, and this is kind of a little bit more relevant to what we're talking about as well, is it's estimated that between 85 and 95% of all individuals who diet are going to experience dietary recidivism over a 2 to 5 year timeline. So what does that mean? Specifically in this context, it means that people who lose a substantial amount of weight, now in the research it's quantified by losing at least around 10% of your body weight, generally 5 to 10%, but oftentimes it's a lot more, right? We look at The Biggest Loser, that show that had people losing like hundreds of pounds in some cases. And over a 2 to 5 year period, 95%, 85 to 95% of those individuals either experience a complete regression back to their baseline weight, or in some cases, they even exceed their starting weight. Now, why is that the case? Is that because diets don't work? Well, no. Obviously, diets do work because those individuals lost a very substantial amount of weight. And in fact, diets do work because most people don't struggle to lose weight. What they struggle with is the maintenance of the weight that they've lost. And there are several reasons for that. We're looking at physiological reasons. We're looking at social and environmental reasons. We're looking at psychological reasons. And this is something called the Biopsychosocial Model. And we're actually going to discuss that a lot more in depth a little bit later. But again, it's important to kind of introduce some of these things to you earlier on so you can understand the context that we're discussing. Now, if you've ever said anything like, oh, well, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. Or I've done this before, I just wasn't able to, sustain the results because things came up. Or if you've said any sort of excuse like that, it's important to understand that you probably do not actually know what to do. Now, there's arguments to be made about competing priorities and all sorts of different things like that. And there are elements of that are valid, but ultimately when it boils down to it, more often than not, if you don't have the outcome that you want, it's because you don't know something. And there's a big difference between a conceptual understanding of something and a knowledge that comes from both a conceptual understanding, but then a tested application of that knowledge to validate the aspects and the application process. And there's a disconnect between those two things. So even though most people know how to lose weight, eat less, move more. Basic laws of thermodynamics. Anyone who says that is not how you lose weight is unfortunately incorrect. These are basic physical laws that govern the universe. If calorie deficit or if energy balance was not the determining factor of weight loss, then no one in the world would ever starve to death. Think about that. So a calorie deficit is the thing that is going to determine whether or not you can lose weight. Now, even though that's true, how you approach a calorie deficit and how you sustain a calorie deficit for a long enough period of time to see the kind of weight loss results that you want, and then how you come out of it into a maintenance phase and then slowly begin to rebuild your metabolism over time, all of these things matter. So there are several fundamental differences that are going to impact how person A might approach a goal versus person B, in spite of them having the exact same goals. And so again, knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. Without application, there is no validation of the knowledge. And that's a very important part because there's so many different little things that come up that you're unaware of prior to having actually gone through that experience yourself. And so it's very important to actually have firsthand experience of things in order to increase the precision and the scope of application of these skill sets and of the information that you're going to be learning here today. And we're going to give you all of this stuff in this course.